I signed on there as a senior fellow, John Paulson Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and we parted company recently at their behest because of some of the public comments that I had made at my podcast and some of the people whom I have been interviewed there, where the issue of the conflict in Palestine and Middle East and Gaza and Israel has come up.
All right. So our friend Glenn Loury came on the show a while back, not too long ago, a few months ago, with his lovely wife, Luann. And we asked him, I am pretty sure we are the first people that really asked him directly what he thought about how so many of the intellectual dark web people had completely flipped on freedom of speech regarding one particular country after October 7th. So this is what he said when he was on our show. Why do you think so many who extolled the virtues of Western civilization and the tradition of the debate until October 7th suddenly found an exception on October 8th?
Yeah, you're right. You do put me on the spot, both with respect to commenting on my nearly 20-year partner in conversation, John McWhorter, and with respect to speaking in public about the conflict in the Middle East, period, full stop.
I mean, we could turn the heat up even more. We could ask Luan to go first. Hey, what do you think? And then toss to you. Just some backstory on that, by the way. We were acquainted with them because it was reported on in the New York Times, of all places, that Luan, his wife, is a progressive, and she listens to left-wing podcasts, including Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, and Do Dissidents. So we read in the New York Times that she liked our show, so that's what made us reach out. So we know her politics are not exactly in line with his. So that was what was behind that. Make this really interesting.
Well, we'll get to Luan.
We'll get to all right. Well, Luan,
I don't want to preempt anything because I agree that would be interesting, and it's going to get interesting before it's over. I think two things. I think, how many babies are you going to bury under rubbles of collapsed building with multi-thousand-ton bombs falling on people who basically can't fight back? You're shooting fish in a barrel, I think. I can comment on that. You can't tell me I can't notice that. You can't ask me to unsee the photographs that I'm seeing. You can't ask me to unhear the reports that I'm hearing. That's not anti-Semitism. That's not anti-Zionism. That's humanity expressing itself. Don't ask me to not notice that. I think that. I think the protests have their warts and all. They have their excesses. They have their stuff that I'm not going to try to defend. Of people, and of course there's anti-Semitism. I agree that there's anti-Semitism. On the other hand, I'm so proud of these kids, I could burst. By the way, at Brown, half these kids are Jews. The kids that got arrested occupying the president's office, half of them were Jewish. Some of my Jewish students are amongst the leading protagonists in expressing outrage at what's going on. So I think that. The other thing I think is the irony is exquisite. This is apropos to the dark web stuff and to John and woke racism, for example, because the identitarian factor driving the pro-Zionist advocacy is like stupefying. These people are taking identity politics to another level altogether. You're going to tell me that my Jewish friend who has never set foot outside of New Jersey, but who dreams of immigrating to Israel and establishing a life in a Jewish country, isn't it identitarian?
Boom. We were not sure how he was going to answer that. There really was not much of a public record of his thoughts on that. So we were very happy to see we were in agreement on that. Now, he didn't just stop there. He has continued. He still has his show with John McWhorter. Now, I mentioned also in this interview with Glenn, hey, man, I liked McWhorter's book, Woke Racism. I've talked about when I went to the Dissident Dialogues, how eye-opening it was for me, because all these people basically had a foreign policy that could have come off Antony Blinken's desk, and McWhorter very condescendingly, and this was last May. It was like the height of the Columbia University protests. And McWhorter, they asked him if he thought we were past peak woke, and he said pointedly, referencing the protests. Well, I would have thought so until 2 weeks ago. And that was very much the attitude, with some rare exceptions, like Li Fang was at that conference. Of course, he had a different view. Schellenberger, I talked to him about it on camera, and he expressed a different view. But for the most part, that was the general view. But Glenn has stuck to his guns, and here's an exchange that actually came up in his interview with Tucker.
There's a reason for the apartness, and it's a very urgent reason. And then you have a debate over what you do in the situation of that reason. What do you do about people being led by a group of terrorists explicitly dedicated to Israel not?
You stand up a Palestinian state. You give those people political rights within a authentic order of sovereignty. You don't keep them stateless for a half century.
But what do you do physically? How do you allocate territory given that situation?
You just said.
Okay.
Just said.
Shall we agree to disagree about Ta-Nehisi Coates and move on?
Damn.
For crying out loud. Anyway.
It's so funny, Glenn, on that situation, though. We're not there.
How many are you going to kill? How many are you going to starve? How many are you going to destroy their habitat? How many are you going to push around like pieces on a chessboard?
Hamas is dedicated to wiping Israel off the map. What do you do about that? It's hard.
Kill them all? Is that your answer? Because that's what's happening.
Suppose what you're trying to do, and here's where there is legitimate debate. You're trying to take out Hamas. I don't know if that's possible, but if you're trying to do that and they hide behind their own people, what does one do?
No, it's not possible. I think we're learning that right now. They hiding behind their own people. All I see is rubble. I don't think there's any place left to hide. There's not a school. There's not a university. There's not a mosque. There's not a hospital. There's not a shelter.
And if you stopped doing all that, the problem is, i.e. the complexity of this is, Hamas want to wipe Israel off the map and will do things like they did on October 7th, and they vowed to do it again.
Because they don't have a state. I'm sorry, I won't take much time. I don't want to derail this, but what Loury said before was that's the perfect answer. If they don't have a state, they cannot organize politically and militarily, which means the only form of resistance is going to be an October 7th style attack. The way you prevent that, what you do is you give them a state and political rights. He answered the question already, and this guy is just so dumb on purpose. Sorry.
What do you do about that is the issue to debate, not looking at the situation and saying they're being...
That's Israel's issue to debate. I'm an American. The issue for me to debate is what do I do with my country's resources on behalf of my ally? That's the issue to debate. I think there's plenty of scope in that area of debate for different opinions about what we Americans put our imprimatur behind.
Oh, I agree.
So let's debate what America should do. I mean, I don't know the answer to the dilemma of Israel. I don't know.
Does anyone? And that's the thing. But it is not as easy as, oh, dear.
Well, is kill them all okay? Can we debate that? Is kill them all okay? I mean, that would solve the problem. Drive them into the sea. Drive them into the Sinai.
Nobody is trying to do that, though. And everybody knows it.
Everybody, laughable.
Nobody's trying to kill
laughable.
them
all. I think the people, and there are many of them, who use the word genocide in reference to what's being done to the people in Gaza, do take that position that you're trying to kill them all. And I think there are many of those people. So you're wrong to say that nobody's saying
there are too many of those people, and that's a misuse of the word. Misuse as in a manipulative use of the word, just like we use white supremacy here. It's not a genocide. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But nobody's trying to kill all of them. That's not the point.
Oh, no? It's not the point. I would like to ask him that question.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Boy, we are both going to catch it for that.
Well, him more than you. Yes.
Yeah, him more than you. McWhorter sees what the consequences are. Glenn pays and is very carefully stupid on purpose.
Right. We're going to pay for that. By we, I mean you. not me.
Yeah, look, man. I mean, it's amazing to me. I understand, like, you're partners with somebody on a podcast for 20 years. You put up with certain things. We're partners on a podcast, what, 5 years? I know Keaton finds Pizza Hut acceptable. I put up with it. I
Yeah.
put up with it. You know, you develop a relationship, a friendship. You overlook certain things. I don't know how he does a show with that cat, man.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, I understand. Look, I went through that. Obviously, I don't have a 20-year relationship with somebody with these views, but yeah, you know, on a lot of the culture war stuff, I was sympathetic to what a lot of figures like McWhorter had to say. Like I said, I liked his book, Woke Racism. But October 7th was just very clarifying about who these people actually are. And if you cannot see a genocide taking place before your eyes, and you cannot, earlier in that clip, they talk about apartheid, and McWhorter's denying that it's apartheid. And Loury's saying they got separate roads.
Yeah.
They have checkpoints.
Yeah.
The South Africans say it's apartheid. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just incredible. So Loury went on Tucker show this week, and Glenn Greenwald tweeted this out. The Manhattan Institute has long postured as opponents of cancel culture. Loury has found a large online following because of his careful and scholarly approach to discussing issues. The discussion of his firing, starting at 5912, is well worth hearing. So, yeah, the Manhattan Institute is one of these kind of think tanks that claims to be defending the Western classical tradition of open debate and inquiry. And ironically, they basically do urban policy. They're not even oriented towards international policy. And yet, they probably got some calls from some of their Zionist donors. We don't know. But they fired Glenn. So here he talks about it a little.
And I signed on there as a senior fellow, John Paulson Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And we parted company recently at their behest, both their sponsorship of my podcast and their employment of me as a senior fellow, because of some of the public comments that I had made at my podcast and some of the people whom I have interviewed there, where the issue of the conflict in Palestine and Middle East and Gaza and Israel has come up. And I ran afoul of the sensibility of my friend, Raihan Salam, who's president of the Manhattan Institute, wrote me saying that we review our scholarly relationships from time to time. This is practically a quote for productivity. And there's no question about my productivity. I've put a dozen articles in their city journal over the last 5 years. And shared priorities. And so I assume it's that we don't share priorities. And the priorities that I assume we don't share have to do with me inviting an historian colleague of mine on the show, the Glenn Show, to talk about the post-October 7th, 2023 incursion of the IDF into Gaza, which he characterized in the same kind of language that international human rights organizations have used as being, if not genocide, then in the same ballpark and something that one needs to be concerned about from a human rights perspective. He thinks the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are right to take initiatives that are holding Israeli officials to account for the prosecution of that conflict. And I had him on the show.
Now, who is he?
His name is Omer Bartov.
Omer Bartov.
He's a student of the Holocaust, of the Nazi extermination campaign in Eastern Europe, and has written books about that. And he's been my colleague for 20 years at Brown. I've gotten to know him, and I knew that he was engaging these questions in a controversial manner, and I wanted to hear from him, so I had him on the show.
So, hey, man, he has on a scholar who's critical of Israel. And that's it. And this is the Manhattan Institute, typical kind of, freedom. The Manhattan Institute is a community of scholars, journalists, activists, and civic leaders dedicated to advancing opportunity, individual liberty, and the rule of law in America and its great cities. Cities, not even involved in international affairs. We work to improve the quality of life in our urban centers with a particular focus on the problem of urban violence and the need for public sector reform. We offer constructive alternatives to identity politics to help overcome our nation's ethnic and cultural divides. It hardly needs to be said, but what could be more identitarian than Israel and Zionism and the idea that this particular country and this particular group are worthy of protections that groups like the Manhattan Institute vociferously argue against for every single other group, regardless of their history with genocide, with slavery. They don't want those carve-outs except for this one group. We champion educational excellence and educational choice for all families. I assume they mean charter schools. We believe that expanding economic freedom is essential to achieving widespread prosperity and upward mobility. The Institute is a public policy think tank, the publisher of City Journal, and a network of emerging leaders. So one of their tabs is culture. They have to say about culture. We seek to overcome America's cultural divides by offering constructive alternatives to identity politics.
Yeah.
Except for one identity. Except for one particular identity, apparently. So Glenn, again, we thank him for directing us to this. Brown's Glenn Loury details being fired from the Manhattan Institute for criticizing Israel's U.S. financed destruction of Gaza. He's then asked by Tucker Carlson, could you have gotten away with it if your criticism were about any country other than Israel, even the U.S.? And this is his answer.
But I think this is a really revealing thing that you're describing. And I wonder if the conversation had been about an American bombing campaign somewhere, there have been so many, but of any country that we've been bombing, you know, and you had said, I think this amounts to collective punishment. And I think it's wrong. This is not how civilized nations behave. If you'd said that about the United States, would you have gotten the same reaction?
No, in my opinion, not at all. You know, the issue of Israel and the nature of the October 7th attack and the political climate that's been created since, and the advent of vigorous protests on American campuses, and the need to marshal, you know, all hands on deck here for the project of Zionism, a project of defending the project of establishing the state of Israel, which is under threat, requires people to get in line. And I think that's what's going on here.
I just think it feels to me counterproductive. I love the United States. I'm never leaving. Tons of things about American history I would not defend. Why would I? Slavery. You know, I like the American Indians. Don't think they were treated very well. That's our part of our founding, and it's depressing, and I'm happy to say that. I think the Vietnam War was a disaster. Iraq was a disaster. U.S. government.
Right at that moment, he lost 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah, it's very unfair what happened to the American Indians. Very unfair.
How dare he? They were fighting each other before we ever got here. They had slavery.
Did all that stuff. And I say that as someone who really loves America.
Have to
I'm not attacking America, but like, it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean I hate America, right? Don't you think that's a better way to approach public debate? Rather than just like, you must read these lines and anyone who disagrees is like a Nazi. That doesn't help the people pushing it.
No, it does not. No, it does not. And I mentioned Haaretz actually wrote an article saying, hey, you're worried about anti-Semitism. Wait until they say that the Jews took down Harvard.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, none of this is good for any group. for any group. I mean, we were talking about it in the previous segment. What did this con job of anti-racism lead to? It empowered the racists to ape the same kind of language and the same kind of precepts. Suppression of speech always just leads to an enormous backlash. I mentioned I was fascinated because I've been studying some ancient civilizations. There was a court advisor in ancient China, I think in the Han Dynasty, who said to stop up speech is more dangerous than to dam up a raging river. Right? Yes. Understanding even in that early stage of civilization, how dangerous it is to suppress speech. It is just amazing how few people in the Zionist camp understand the forces that they are putting into motion with this campaign to stop all dissent, even from a respected conservative scholar like Glenn Loury. Like, what do you think that signals to people? Particularly if you understand, if you know that one of the principal tropes about Jews is that they have this power behind the scenes. Do you really think you're helping that by going on this whack-a-mole campaign to shut down all speech? Like, you understand that the only thing standing between Jews and an enormous wave of the kind of anti-Semitism that you claim is sweeping through the nation, but really is not, is going to be somebody like Trump, who has that kind of control over that population, who go along with this Zionist shit, but don't like it mostly. All it's going to take is for Trump or somebody in his position with that group to say, yeah, and you know what? These Jews, and that's it, man. That's it. And you have put any leader who wants to seize that in a position where you have a large part of the population has been primed to believe the absolute worst, not least by what they're seeing on their social media coming out of Gaza every day.
Yeah, Loury, we might reach back out to him to see if he wants to come back on the show to talk about this, which maybe he will, maybe he won't. He might be in enough trouble already.
He seems like a man who sticks to his principles.
It's funny.
Look, he's not dumb. He knew he was courting this risk talking about this.
Oh, of course. And once when we asked him, because we interviewed him prior to the election, we interviewed him like in the summertime. And, we asked him who he was going to vote for. And he kind of hinted that he might be voting for Cornell of all people, because he knows Cornell. He likes Cornell.
Right.
So, he considers himself a conservative. He sounded pretty independent to me, sounded pretty heterodox to me when we talked to him. And no, he's an interesting guy. And he always struck me as a very good person. Which is why it's not really surprising to me that he has this take on this issue, because really this is a test of who you are as a person as much as anything else. And so, it's not surprising to me that he took this position, and it's not surprising to me that they've, canned him over it. Life goes on. He doesn't need him. He'll be fine, and good for him.
Please clap.